So the idea is that as we have been exercising how we manage to work locally in a place-based and how to articulate it on an interregional region, so we have now 4 experiences, real experiences, that they are already working with these approaches. So the idea is that if each one of you can explain us how are you working, how you envision the experimentation spaces, and just to explain us which are those challenges and the opportunities that you also see when implementing any of your experiences. So I will start. Ayman, if you can explain us how do you work from the network of living labs, and which are these, how do you envision the experimentation place-based spaces? Please go ahead.
Good morning and thank you. Good afternoon already. Time flies. We've been working on living labs for quite some time now, like around 2 to 3 years. And we had a cross experience across different regions, mainly in the Mediterranean, but also in Europe, in Asia, and all the way up to Canada and Australia. And you see that the first thing you learn is beyond the buzzword. You know, like the first challenge we have is to define what is a living lab and to distinguish what does the living lab do and what is the difference between a living lab and a lab. So basically, to understand each other, if we're working with the same framework, you know, we need to establish a common grounds, and that has been one of the challenges, let's say. Second thing is the living lab by itself, as a concept, is a collaborative environment. So it's meant to bring together different types of profiles and stakeholders. So this is also a challenge, because not in each place, what do you call a stakeholder, what you call a proactive a contributor, changes a lot. It could be your friend in one place, it could be your enemy in another place. So, and that changes also a lot. That has been proven a challenge. And the third challenge I would like to add is the continuity and the scalability of the work we're doing. You know, so there is always this idea that at the start, there's a lot of energy. You know, like you have sometimes the feeling that you're pushing a car that's stuck in mud, right? I mean, like push up and push, and then it starts to move, you know, and then it goes down the mountain, you know, so in the valley, and it crashes and burn. So at the end of the day, making continuity of this work so it can actually scale the solution that you are building is, I believe, the biggest challenge. You know, so that, if you like, the 3 main challenges from my perspective.
Okay, thank you. And the opportunities?
Well, living labs are very interesting in terms of opportunities, because number one, we meet a lot of people. So we are connected in a very broad network of collaborators that allows us to build new stuff, like, for example, new value chains, and to imagine things that before were only on paper. For example, how to connect value chains in rural and urban environments. If you connect them, that's very nice, you know. So there is a big opportunity for that. Second opportunity is that the living labs finally seems that it's a mechanism for tech transfer, or for getting from research to market. And here we distinguish between what is an enabling technology and what is a co-designed solution. So the living lab provides that co-designed solution that bring together different actors to adopt. It provides stakeholder buy-in into that solution. So people basically allow it to flourish and to grow. Maybe also living labs, because it's a little bit of a buzzword, and everybody's very interested in that, it's a good financial magnet, you know, like if you know what you're doing, you know, like, so it allows you to hunt more actively or more proactively for funds. It accelerates a lot this process. Now, we need to also evaluate how much funding we're getting at the end of the day, and if this process is still efficient or not. Compared with the past, it's much better. But compared with our ambition, we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you, Ayman. I will go with Milika. If you can explain us a bit and share your experience with the portfolio approach by when orchestrating these transformative innovation interventions from the UNDP.
Yes, thank you so much. So there's a quote from a Rwandan architect who was hired to design a new housing project. So what started as designing new housing ended up being a whole kind of well-being and transformation project that she was completely ill equipped to do. So her postmortem on the experience was, if you're not designing for systems, you're just decorating problems. And it kind of encapsulates a little bit where our team, which is about 7 people working in the organization of 25,000 people and working on transformation. That's not where we started, right? Before getting to a portfolio, I think this is a really good question that you ask, Ayman. The initial challenge that we had to deal with is the polarities in the innovation field, which if you remember the definition of innovation, idea implemented successfully that results in value, right? So on one side of the innovation field, there is a focus on moving from idea to implementation. Right? Move fast, break things. A colleague of mine would say, throw a grenade into a bureaucracy. It's very technical. It's very quick pace, right? On the other side, you've got value and the question of who gets to determine what the value is. And for a long time, at least from our perspective, these two different poles did not really speak to each other. It's not that one side of innovation field is better than the other. The organization needs to be ambidextrous in doing both at the right time. And it took us a while to really kind of work out how do the two come together. And I think there's quite a lot of resonance in the place-based experimentation because it needs to focus on both. Moving from idea to implementation quickly is to be able to prove a case to change the regulation, or at least to give you a little bit of rope to play with, but then you need to show what the value is at longer term. The way that plays out so the reason why we started investing a lot more into understanding what does innovation have to say about transformation is that for a long time the pendulum swung more to the lab aspect, right? So UNDP is the first organization who has set up public sector innovation labs in governments in the developing context. We've seeded something called accelerator labs in over 100 countries in the world. But then colleagues were telling us from the field, yeah, that's great. And it's addressing something that we haven't had, but what about this other thing labs are not really kind of making the dial move entirely. And COVID was a big phase shift because being connected to the lab community globally, no single public sector innovation lab was involved in anything consequential having to do with COVID response. And this is when the field kind of really looked in the mirror and said, we're not doing something right, right? Not bashing ourselves because nobody gets to question economists as politicians come and go, right? The economists stay and they survive. But that was the moment of kind of reckoning. So fast forward 4 or 5 years of us kind of understanding, how do you move from systems and complexity being something that's in the realm of abstraction and academic research and, writing papers to something that's really practical. This is a typical situation that we would encounter on the ground, right? So if you take Zambia, which is hit with like a cocktail of crap, right? One of the most unequal countries in the world. 7 out of 10 people live below $2 a day. 6 out of 10 people don't have access to energy. You've got Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Workforce Development, Ministry of Entrepreneurship. Everybody's doing great. Like on the dashboard of their KPIs and logs, and everybody's delivering what they're delivered, they're aligning with the National Development Plan. But then when you look into rural areas, a farming family cannot buy a fridge because energy comes in and out at best, or they don't have access to energy. Which means what they grow, they have to sell right away or they lose it. Mm-hmm. And then the folks who are selling them seeds and buying out food have seeds from a year, 2, 3 ago, which are completely misfit for the type of weather patterns that are hitting the region. So then the food processing industry is dying, right? So where we come in, and then you can question whether this is innovation or not, right? You can question whether innovation is connection, right? There is money in the system. There is grants, there is impact investors, there's loans, there's concessional finance, but nobody talks to anybody else, right? So if UNDP gives a grant to a company that raises, business skills of different players on the ground, right? The company that puts solar panels on the roof allow the company that sells fridges to sell more of them, right? Is that innovation? I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily innovation. Because now I have a fridge, I have less post-harvest loss. So the company who buys out my food can buy another van, because all of a sudden they've got more produce to get to the food exporting factory, who now not only processes food for Zambian market, but they can actually export it. At that point in time, we can go to the government and say, yes, you've got a lot of loans coming from outside. Yes, mining is a really big deal for you because it brings in a lot of revenues. But here's this teeny tiny proof that matching the right money to the right intervention at the right point in time starts giving you a bit of an alternative revenue generating model. Right? Now, the way I talk about it, my colleagues are like, that sounds so easy, please don't talk about it in that way. But really, that's the story. What happens in the background is all of you know is, it depends on people it depends on personalities and making that stitch. I will end maybe two things that we've learned in this process that I think get us to start questioning the concepts of de-risking and scale. The financial folks who we are just starting to talk with, because money speaks, they're really interested in this concept of kind of innovation is connection, because for the finance world, de-risking means investing away. So if you've got your money in currencies, you start investing in other currencies to reduce risk, right? If you have your money in real estate, you start buying stocks and gold and whatever. In a place-based innovation, you cannot invest away. There is a place, and people live there. You can't, if you invest in some other people, then you're not investing in them. Their view on the whole portfolio, innovation is connection, is the deliberate connections that we're making between enterprises that can make each other's lives and revenues bigger. That's actually de-risking. And we've never, up until that point in time, thought about portfolio compositions of interventions and policies that you have in a system. We never thought of that as a de-risking mechanism. Even the way that we give grants in development, you put out a challenge, 1,000 people apply, and you narrow down to like 5 best ones, and you give 5 grants. Magic, okay, nothing happens, right? So that's one, and the second one is scale, right? So we were, in development sector, hit on the head with a hammer saying, ooh, you don't have interventions that can take on hundreds of millions of dollars. Therefore, you cannot scale. But in a story from Zambia, the scale is something very, very different. It's finding 1 or 2 companies that sell fridges, that have vans, and that do solar panels, and 2, 3 farming families. That's scale. It's fractals, and that changes the game. Because that means anybody can scale, not just McKinsey, who has people whose job is just to fill out grants, right, and application processes, because they can afford it. Anybody, an NGO, a community organization, can scale by finding things that connect and compound one another.
Oh, no, that's
I've talked a lot. I don't think you're going to be asking me any
it's
other questions, but you asked, so there you go.
No, it's wonderful, and I think that it's a very close explanation of how this connection, the power of the connection,
Yeah.
and as you say, to thinking not to decorate the problems.
Yeah.
Thank you, Milka. I will go with Misha. So, as she was explaining, this polarization and how we can test through these spaces of experimentation. So if you can share with us how you are envisioning these regulatory free or sandboxes, as some say it. Now, if you can explain us a bit how these kind of polarizations, we can find a way to experiment in these kind of spaces, please.
Straight to the point, right?
Yes.
But before going there, I have to thank the organizers for inviting us here. So many thanks to the Interreg colleagues, and thank you for colleagues who are part of this experimentation journey with us. It's a big deal for us, and we really, really appreciate it. Before I go directly into regulatory spaces, let me say a few words for a context. For those of you who may not be familiar with what Joint Research Center does and what preparatory action is, because it's important, it sets the context about what we can do. So the Joint Research Center, now for you, this is old story. For some of you already know, not necessarily. We are part of the European Commission. We are a Directorate General, and the motto is science for policy. So basically our mission, we are not a policy DG. We are not making policy. We are informing policies traditionally. So I have about 3,000 colleagues who do research from A to Z. Some of them sit in actual labs. Some of them sat in offices like myself. Some try to get themselves out there into the real world. And now, what we do within this preparatory action is challenging a little bit what JRC normally does. Because, science for policy sounds like, we sit there, we do research, we run our models, we deliver the results, and that is science for policy. What we do here is slightly different. Now, why? So the part of the JRC I work for deals with innovation policies. Originally, a few years back, we had our hands full supporting smart specialization strategies and this sort of approaches. At the same time, we observed a rise of new type of approaches that recognize, let's say, the complexity, uncertainty, urgency of some challenges that simply are not addressed, but the way we currently design and implement public intervention. It's a massive mismatch, and it kind of, we need to recognize it, right? I mean, it's easy to say, to have this introduction saying societal challenges are complex and uncertain and so on. Now, having said that, and back to decorating, as you would say. So within this approach, we try to be just really honest about this and ask ourselves a question: what does it mean if we really recognize that challenges are complex, uncertain, and urgent? And what does it mean if we follow the place-based approach that, as you know, the European Commission has recognized in its policies for decades, and it, in a way, has a base in the treaty because it's part of the subsidiarity approach. Now, a few years back, European Parliament gave us mandate through the preparatory action to experiment with these approaches. So for those of you who don't know, I must say a few years ago, I didn't know what preparatory action was. It's not a very well-known instrument. I don't know. Who of you knows what PAs are? Anybody? So very few hands, right? So basically, this is an initiative that can be initiated by citizens. It can be put forward by a single MEP, in our case, one MEP. Came up with an idea, why don't you experiment with this transformative policy approaches from the perspective of places? Came to us and basically gave us not that much money to do, but some mandate to at least to work with territories around Europe and beyond. So long story short, we called for expressions of interest very, very broadly for regions to get engaged into a range of activities from awareness raising through capacity building to experimentation. We received more than 200 expressions of interest from more than 200 territories. Why do we say territories? It's a bit of a European jargon. We say territories because it covers all the levels. So under territories are cities, regions, and sometimes national administrations. I'm not a big fan of that, but okay, that's how we call it, so territories. And 45 of them raised their hands saying, look, we have a problem. We see that the current approaches we apply do not really respond to the challenge. We are up for experimenting with you. Well, Tatiana is one of them, with other colleagues in the room, from Azores, from Ankara, and some of them are not with us. So Malta is not here, and other colleagues from Turkey, from Ahler, are not here. But anyway, they joined us in this journey, so we call it experimentation journey. And now, I could present it with a lot of hot air, so to say, but no hot air. What it actually is, we sit together, let's say for a year, mostly virtual, through meetings which are online, and we well, we started from thinking about what is really the challenge that we address, what is specific about this challenge, what can we do about this, and in this context, the challenge was broadly understood food security, understood from place-based perspective. We were inspired by the suggestion from Catalonia to focus on the problems with regulatory frameworks, which are not fit for purpose. And those of you who are in the, I mean, I think you already, thanks to our colleagues, you had this broad introduction to that. But I'll explain why we thought from the JRC point of view, we thought it's a good idea to look at it. Well, first of all, we have evidence this is a real problem. So we start from a problem. We don't start from a fancy concept. We don't want to make our lives even more complicated. We start from a problem that is not adequately addressed. So this sounds simple, but I wish all the policy processes started that way. Anyway, so there is a problem. And we realized that we have a window of opportunity at the moment. Those of you who follow the current changes in policy landscape on the EU level probably noticed that there is a big emphasis on regulatory learning, experimentation. So regulatory sandboxes are already present in the European legislation, in Artificial Intelligence Act, in the Net Zero Industry Act, in the Startup and Scale-up Strategy. Soon they will be also part of the European Innovation Act. So they are there. They create a space. But what we notice is that they are typically introduced without enough regard, in our view, to their application in real places, in the real world. The sandboxes, as you know, are nothing new, but normally they are kind of a national level initiative. They are rarely designed with the recognition of place-based problems. They come from fintech, aviation, but we know that in some sectors, especially food, place is very real, and the challenges are very, very localized. So we suggested, okay, why don't we think about what would it take for innovation ecosystems to include this function, right? So we are not building an initial institution. We are thinking, what would it take for innovation ecosystems around Europe to be able to suggest, first of all, to suggest simplification to existing regulation, to address some ambiguities that may arise between different legislations, like, for example, environmental protection versus agricultural versus land use and so on, and the ambiguities between mandates on the local, regional, national, European level. This is really, really complex. We know we cannot address it by better planning. This we know. So we started from uncertainty, complexity. We know that we cannot address it by complicating solutions. We need to think differently. Hence, we thought, okay, why don't we think about this as a space in which is not separate from existing ecosystems, which is based on ongoing initiatives, ongoing experimental projects like those run by countless living labs, test beds, policy labs, you name it. As you know, there's a proliferation of them, but very rarely they cut to the policy change. And now we are in the journey. It's a very explorative journey for us too. I said that we are pushing the boundaries of what we do normally, because we are not just analyzing, we are not part of this process to gather data and monitor. We actively co-created this space because we recognize that we also have a role. In a way you could say we're part of the problem, but we want to be part of the solution. And through work with colleagues in this food security, we have involvement of different territories. In their own work, you've heard it, they connect with different levels of governance. So we are addressing this learning in vertical way. We are obviously looking across different sectors. And importantly, from the European point of view, we know that it's not about supporting one place-based sandbox. This is part of the much bigger vision on how to improve, almost so to say, a regulatory culture. So that not to design new legislation based just on macro level data, but maybe before going to legislative process, ask questions locally and see how things resonate. So this would be the top-down use. Or here, what are the suggestions for simplification or new regulations that may benefit and, well, improve the situation, let's say, in the current situation, which is not too great. Yeah, I mean, I'll stop because it is just a panel, but anyway, and we follow with the other session that will be a little bit more structured, so hopefully we can pass these messages. But I think we align about the challenge we face, I think, in terms of changing the way we intervene.
No, thank you. Thank you for clarifying which is the preparatory action and how you envision at the same time, how you discover this way of getting reality on board. No, I think that every time that you're mentioning the way that you're getting a more place-based approach is not about just having a pilot, but having testing about the reality. No, so I will go with Tatiana. So if you can share which are the approach of the TIP labs and how do you envision through the governance project, how you envision to make this interregional dimension, how to make this approach.
Okay, yeah, I will try to summarize a little bit because these transformative innovation labs that we are promoting within Interreg project, it want to be an answer to all these kind of problems that they have explained. So we started in the last Interreg Med program. We had this Panorama Med that was a governance project among different partners from the whole Mediterranean that we were public administrations trying to accelerate green and just transitions. And so in this project, we are some of the partners that were in the former one, like Alessandro or Antonio. So we really understood that we had these Med challenges that were in the Med, but at the same time were local. That in the Med there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of people trying to solve separately the problems, but that we were not moving into the right direction. So we started to think and to explore how we could address that. And we saw that it's always important, as they say, because at the end we come from very different backgrounds, but we arrive, all of us, to the same conclusion, and that is we need to start from the problem. We need to start from where the problem is, with the people that care for the problem, with the people that are trying to look for solutions to address the problem, but not theoretically from research or from wherever, because they are the people suffering the consequences and addressing, because it's important for them. Then when we start from there, then how can we mobilize all the instruments, resources, knowledge that we have? Then living labs are an important piece of the solution. But if these living labs are serving to the projects of the researchers and not to the problems of the people, yes, they are useless.
Yes.
The same with policy. If the policies are like strategies that you pay some consultancies and you define big strategies towards the goals and you whatever, or regulations, it's not helping the problems. Researchers doing super good and interesting projects, developing the most challenging technologies and solutions that are very smart and they provide, but then they cannot be implemented because there is no regulation. Or even the civil society that they are really fighting and trying to improve things in the territory. But maybe, because I think that you told me, no, that some of the people say, yeah, maybe the public administration is the enemy, no? The activists say public administration is the enemy. No, come on, we are all in the same league. So how can we break this kind of polarizations that each one is working in different ways? So TIP Labs, this approach that we are developing this methodology, wants to be an answer to that. It's not one fighting against each other. It's about bringing together those people who have a shared vision of the future for a certain territory. Today, I think it was a little bit of debate because some of you saw that this shared vision of the future were too far away. But this is, it needs to be in this way because we need visions that are that inspire many different people, because we need different peoples that are brought on board. If we make really a very specific vision of the future, many people stay away. But this vision needs to have a clear directionality, because what we have learned is that if we want to change things, if we really believe in transformative innovation, it's not about building consensus with all the people and the stakeholders in a territory, because many times we get captured by this. If you want transformation, consensus is not possible. You need to work with many different people, but you need to start with the energy of those who care for the problem and those who want to find solutions into a certain directionality. If not, you don't move forward. So all the methodology about the TIP Lab is how, when we have a problem in a place, that can be the problems that you have discussed this morning, how these people living there define a shared vision of where they want to go, and then start understanding together, developing a common understanding, and what are the obstacles in the system, in the current system now, that are not allowing us to move forward. At the same time, what are the opportunities? Because maybe in a room there are some researchers, some policymakers, some activists that really can work in different ways together to mobilize some kind of energy. So, and then with all them, we need places where we can experiment, but not only with technology, also with policies and regulations. And many times it's not enough if there are only people from the local level, because many regulations are from the European Union or from the national level. That's why it's important working with the European Commission in order to work together. How can we create this safe space in which we can experiment not only technologies, but also regulations, because public administrations need to be less afraid about experimenting, because if not, we were talking with Sergio during lunch, they develop a regulation and then it has so many unintended effects and the contrary effects. So we need spaces for experimenting these kind of things. And then working, as Millie said, it's not about this and that and that. We need to connect things, because some small investments and many small efforts of many different people connected, but there is a theory of change, and that we know that we are working in many different local levels together to address the same challenges. This network of people can really do a big impact. So this is why in this project, what we try to do is to connect these people that are working at local level on challenges that are the same in many Mediterranean countries, and how can we connect these local spaces, many of them living labs that need to go a step further. Can they connect to interregional networks that support these local challenges and learn from them in order to create this movement? And as Millie said, the money is in the system, the knowledge is in the system, the people wanting to change things are in the system. The key is how we create these frameworks and how can we mobilize this energy in order to do that. And what we are trying to do with this project and with the TIP Labs is this. So we have still until 2029 to do that, no, Alessandro? So that's, and this kind of innovation camps is the space in which some of you are coming many years, but some of you are new. And so this is how to build new alliances in order to move further in this way.
Thank you, Tatiana. And I will take this last part, what you're saying, to have a final, so we can continue with the next the program on time. Where is Chaime? But it's okay. So now taking this point that Tatiana was saying, and how, so from your organizations that you're not, how do you see this TIP Lab opportunity in what you're doing? So how does this TIP Lab approach and this effort, because it's a huge program in the Mediterranean, can really make a mainstreaming approach on the real policy at the upper level, at the EU or the worldwide? So please, if you can share, how do you envision the contribution from TIP Lab?
Yeah. Is it okay? Yeah. So maybe two specific things that are very useful for us from your experience, right? One is being able to specifically point to the examples happening in this particular geography, right? So we had Victor and Tatiana speak to the General Assembly, the high-level week of the UNGA, as well as present to the GA Second Committee, which is a committee on economy and finance, about the work of shared agendas and bringing systems to the place-based transformation. That was incredible. So two effects of that, right? One, it was much easier for us within UNDP to make an argument. Come on, guys, we've got Catalan government and we've got Zambia being ahead. Let's catch up. Mm-hmm. So showing what happens outside helps really the politics internally move, one. And two, the coalitions that we're able to connect, Tatiana, to your point of getting different people together, leads to credibility that then kind of triggers more political wind in this respect, right? So I think this is one clear, and it's kind of a politics and credibility, legitimizing the approaches across. I think that's one big value. The second big value is really digging into very specific cases of transformation that are happening across different shared agendas that are incredibly so. I want to connect Zambia to the Barcelona and the outer regions of Barcelona around agriculture, because I think there is quite a lot of connection and similarities in experience. I don't think we can cookie cutter our way into transformation, but there are some things that do carry across. So I think being able to kind of string those experiences, to share examples, to borrow tactics of what works, what doesn't, is incredibly useful.
Perfect. Thank you, Melita.
In my view, the connections are very clear. First of all, we are here, so the synergy is already happening. I see 2 points now. I mean, one is that TIP Labs could become a testing ground for different models of how this regulatory learning could actually happen in practice. So they are designed to be part of ecosystems, right? Not built on top of them, but part, so they can be the ones to test and develop different models. That's a no-brainer. We have 1 year in our experimentation journey. You have a bit more time, so this will be one way forward. Another really topical issue is the notion of cross-border learning. So as I said, one of the key issues discussed now in the context of introducing regulatory sandboxes to the legislation from the EU point of view is this cross-border effect. I mean, the question is basically how to introduce this sort of models without introducing additional inequalities between different countries. Example, if I'm a French farmer and I have a nice sandbox, how come I can have it and my colleague somewhere else doesn't have it, right? I mean, it's a very sensitive issue. I would think that programs such as Interreg could explore the role to support the learning function of this regulatory sandboxes. This is a core function of regulatory sandbox. Why? Because regulatory sandboxes are not run to support one company. The whole intention is to scale. Yeah. Otherwise, this is not delivering on their ambition. So I think that it could be a very fertile ground to think and develop and test different monitoring and evaluation methodologies based on which a case can be made for mainstreaming certain solutions.
Wonderful. Please, Simon.
Okay, I'll try not to disagree too much. But for me, like when we talk about the place, we're not talking about an administrative boundaries. I mean, this changes a lot from my viewpoint, and it's not something that is that static at the end of the day. It is, but not that much. And this tip is also, from my perspective, a very good opportunity and a mechanism to empower people, to empower local government, to empower local ecosystem, to deal, to bequeath that process, that knowledge, that action, that activities, that wheel that we try to do upstairs or downstairs to the actual place. Because a place is not just a place, it's also a people, right? I mean, there are people living in this place. And the challenge is not just about the territory, It's their challenge. Who are we to solve their challenge for them? So their voice is very important. So the tip becomes, from my perspective, a very strong participatory mechanism. And that's the chip that changes. And that's the real mechanism that makes it alive. You know, I'm extremely afraid of disagreeing is about...
But why do you disagree?
Because about consensus. And I feel that consensus is hard, but it's achievable. I mean, there are a lot of things to a certain... Yeah, I know. I think that there are mechanisms to achieve some sort of a consensus, at least on a specific challenge, on a specific problem. Of course, there's always going to be people who disagree or don't care. You know, we cannot put everybody on board, but we can create enough dynamics and mechanism that could be overwhelming without it being hegemonous. You know, like,
That's what we are
yeah.
saying.
So
Yeah.
we agree. Okay,
We agree.
so I don't have to be afraid. Okay, so for me, this is the potential. It's not about technology, of course. It's not about the mechanisms of the process. It's about bequeathing that. It's about letting it go with a little bit of supervision. And everybody is anxious about that process. Will it provoke a revolution? We don't know. Will it provoke change? You know, at the end of the day, we're going to start losing control and start giving it back by empowering the people to participate. And that's the part that is really attractive in the tip from my perspective.
Yeah, can I say something?
See, of course.
Because it's not about participation, it's about engagement. Because participatory is I participate saying something, dialogue. It's about engagement in doing
Yes.
something.
Yes.
That is a difference.
Yes.
And we are talking about coalitions of the willing. We want to engage all of those that are willing to change things into a certain direction. Those who don't want to change things, they don't participate. It's not about
Having
excluding
everybody on
people,
the bus. Yes.
but it's about starting making these coalitions of those people who care for a problem and want to do something about this problem. And what we have seen in the cases where we are working, that these coalitions at the beginning are less people, but then you attract more and more people when things start to happen.
Yes.
Tatiana is basically creating FOMO for others to feel so they can join the coalition. This is the takeaway, basically.
Tatiana is more practical. But,
Being from the public
yeah,
administration.
being from the
but-
public administration. But, you know, of course, it's about engagement, not participation in a sense. It is about identifying yourself with what is happening and being part of it. If that's what we call engagement, that it is engagement. You know, of course, we don't have to have every single people there. There is leadership. You know, there's protagonism, there's people that are driving the bus, and there are people that sit on the back of the bus, of course. And that people don't want to go on the bus anyhow. But the bus is not against them.
No,
You know,
exactly.
you know, bus is not here to damage them. They feel also, you know, that this process eventually is going to trickle down something positive.
Yeah. Micha, do you want to say something?
Just following out what you said, I think it's it's really important. I mean, these initiatives, broadly speaking, they're political initiatives as well. They are not purely technical. And I think you all feel it, right? It's not just bringing engineers around technology. The moment we step out of purely technology testing, something else is happening. And I think from the point of view of designing better policies, especially now, it's absolutely critical. So, the policy landscape is changing rapidly for many reasons, with this shift towards, again, more competitiveness framing of everything. And there is a massive risk with that, because if it goes too far, then we are forgetting about already massive discontent that exists, partly, not only, but also partly because a lot of policies are not designed with a sensitivity to places and people. You're right, it's not about places, but people. So in a way, I mean, this is about putting human face on policy. And I would even say sometimes in a good way, we are in democracy, to challenge some of the policies, because through this network, through the STIP labs, they are not only translating European objectives, which is very, very important, to translate, make sense out of them, but that the concept that we work on, I have to be careful what I say, the concept that we work on also opens the door for the bottom-up experimentation. And this means, I would imagine that if there is 10 years forward with many of these sort of places somehow connected, then they could be a source inspiration for new type of legislation that may may improve, let's say, may bring this union a bit closer, let's say, to people, you know, like, and so there is a deliberative dimension to these exercises. They're not purely technical.
Transformative innovation policy labs. That's why they are called policy, because it's about changing policies in order to achieve these goals.
Yeah. So I don't know if someone in the room wants to raise a question, a comment. No? Okay. So let's finish the table. Thank you very much to all of you. And I think that it's an inspiring example